We love the idea that people can change. Stories of transformation fill our books, movies, and even our conversations. But the harsh truth is, most people never truly change. At least not in the way they think they do, and not unless something deeply disruptive happens to their internal world. While we may update behaviors or adapt to new routines, true change, deep, emotional, identity level transformations, rare, difficult, and almost always catalyzed by something powerful enough to shake our core beliefs. What most people call change is often a temporary adjustment or a mask worn to cope with circumstances, but beneath the surface, the same wounds, patterns, and defense mechanisms operate like software that's never really rewritten, just dressed differently. We tell ourselves stories like, "I've moved on," or "I'm a better person now," but if the right trigger appears, the old self often reemerges, reminding us that true change hasn't happened yet. And this isn't because people are lazy or broken, it's because real change demands something more than willpower. It requires insight, emotional exposure, a willingness to lose your former identity, and often pain. In fact, without discomfort, people rarely question the systems that built them, systems rooted in childhood conditioning, past trauma, social identity, and fear, until something pierces the illusion we've wrapped around ourselves, be it heartbreak, loss, failure, or spiritual awakening. Most of us stay in the same loop, repeating the same cycles, thinking we're evolving, when in reality, we're only rearranging the furniture in a house built by our younger selves. And that's why this script doesn't begin with the assumption that people change easily. It begins with the truth that most people resist change until their pain becomes louder than their comfort. There's something strange and almost tragic about how human beings will choose familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. It's not that we enjoy suffering, but rather that we find safety in what we already know, even if it's destroying us slowly, from toxic relationships to self-sabotaging patterns. People often cling to what hurts them because it feels predictable, and in the mind's twisted logic, predictable equals safe. The brain, built to protect us from danger, doesn't always distinguish between actual threat and emotional discomfort. So anything new, any possibility of transformation, gets labeled as dangerous simply because it's unfamiliar. So we rationalize staying where we are. This is just who I am. People don't change. It's too late for me. And in doing so, we unknowingly reinforce the walls of our own prison. Childhood plays a huge role in this, because if you were raised in chaos, chaos feels like home. And if you were raised to believe you had to earn love, you'll seek out relationships that make you prove your worth over and over again, not realizing that you're reliving your emotional origin story on repeat. We get stuck in patterns because we build identities around them. And when a person begins to feel like they are their trauma or are their bad habits, changing those patterns feels like death, even if the life they're living is slowly suffocating them. And so people don't change because change feels like losing control, losing comfort, and most dangerously, losing self until, of course, something happens that forces them to question it all. Real change almost never arrives quietly. It comes crashing in like a storm, disguised as heartbreak, betrayal, loss, rock bottom, or an emotional awakening so loud it silences everything else. And this is where transformation begins, not from motivation or discipline, but from a kind of spiritual collapse that forces us to finally see what we've been avoiding, denying, or justifying for years. Something breaks the surface, maybe the end of a relationship that exposed all our unhealed wounds, maybe a diagnosis that rewrites our sense of time, maybe a career failure that reveals how empty success really feels in that moment. We're stripped of our illusions, our coping mechanisms, and our stories about who we are and what we deserve. It's in this rawness, this unbearable honesty, that people begin to change, not because they want to, but because they can't not change anymore. The old life simply doesn't fit. The old behaviors feel foreign, and the lies we used to tell ourselves lose their power. And it's here, in a mess, that something remarkable happens. We become willing to ask real questions. Why do I keep repeating this? Who am I without my patterns? What have I been running from? And these questions don't always have immediate answers, but they break the cycle of unconscious living. Pain, when faced head-on, becomes a mirror so sharp it cuts away denial. And in that reflection, we find the version of ourselves that's been buried beneath fear, shame, and habit. It's not the pain that changes us, it's the meaning we extract from it. And the decision we make when there's no mask left to wear. Every real transformation is preceded by a mirror moment. The terrifying but necessary act of facing yourself without filters, without blame, and without the comfort of excuses. This is the point where change becomes possible, because denial no longer works, and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. When a person finally stops pointing fingers outward and begins turning inward, asking not, why did they hurt me? But why did I stay? Not, why does this keep happening to me? But what inside me keeps attracting, allowing, or tolerating this? And that shift in ownership is seismic, because the moment you realize you're the common denominator in your life, you're either crushed by the weight of responsibility or liberated by the power it gives you. For most, it's both at once a collapse and a rebirth. This mirror moment doesn't arrive politely, and it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It often comes when you've run out of distractions, when your old coping tools stop working, when the voice inside your head becomes louder than the noise around you. And in that silence, you meet the parts of yourself you've hidden, the angry child, the desperate lover, the perfectionist, the saboteur. It's painful, but it's also sacred, because for the first time, you see your whole self, not just the version you perform for the world. And in that encounter, you realize that all along, your life has been a reaction to unhealed wounds and silent fears. Isn't that the only way out is through radical honesty? Through grieving who you thought you were, and through choosing to rebuild, not as a reaction to pain, but as a response to truth. What most people don't realize is that true change doesn't feel like growth at first. It feels like death. The death of who you thought you were, who you were pretending to be, or who others needed you to be. And that's why so many people resist transformation, because it asks them to let go of identities they've clung to for survival. The person who was always the fixer, the strong one, the victim, the achiever, the martyr. All of these roles become prisons when you're ready to evolve, and letting them go can feel like losing your foundation. But it's only through that identity death that space is made for something new, something real, something not built from trauma or fear or performance, but from truth. And this stage of change is brutal because it comes with grief, not just for relationships or routines, but for the parts of yourself you're shedding, even the broken ones you hated, because they were still familiar, still yours. Yet, in that void, something remarkable happens. You begin to rebuild consciously, asking not, who should I be, but who am I when I'm not protecting myself? And from that question emerges a self that isn't performing, isn't reacting, but is living, aligned with values rather than wounds, driven by authenticity rather than fear. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about unbecoming everything that was never truly you to begin with. And this new self doesn't arrive with fanfare, but with peace, the kind that comes from knowing your life is no longer a reaction to your past, but a conscious creation of your future. When real change finally takes root, it doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand revelations. It shows up in the quiet, ordinary moments where you respond differently than you once did, where your triggers no longer own you, where peace no longer feels unfamiliar. True transformation isn't just about healing the past. It's about building a life that no longer revolves around it, about making choices not from fear or survival, but from clarity, intention, and self-respect. The people who truly change don't become perfect. They become honest, present, and conscious, able to see their old patterns without being pulled back into them. And yet, even after transformation, the work doesn't stop. Because change is not a destination, it's a way of living. A daily recommitment to staying awake to yourself, especially when it would be easier to fall back into numbness or autopilot. This kind of living requires courage not once, but again and again, to speak truth when it trembles, to say no when it's easier to please, to slow down when the world demands hustle, and to choose alignment over approval. People don't change because they want to. They change because the cost of staying the same becomes too high, And once they do, they discover something incredible, that everything they were looking for, peace, love, freedom, was never outside them, but buried beneath the layers they were finally brave enough to shed. And so the final truth is this: people don't change unless something wakes them up, shakes them up, or breaks them open, and once it happens, there's no going back. Only forward into a life that finally feels like their own.